We have Dean Manzoori here from UniVoiP, and they are a unique supplier for Microsoft Teams Voice. Dean and I have only had a very brief conversation prior to this, so I am getting to know him and UniVoiP along with you all. I do have a pretty decent background, having sold UCaaS as well as Microsoft Teams Voice during my time with BCM1, who is a Microsoft Gold partner, and they have that capability. But as I understand it, UniVoiP does something very unique with that. So before I spoil it, I will hand it over to Dean to give himself an introduction. And if you could give us just the high level of UniVoiP, and then we'll go into some of the details.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. My name is Dean Manzoori. I'm CEO at UniVoiP. We are a leading cloud communications company that pivoted to providing voice for Microsoft Teams in 2019. Prior to that, and even today, we do provide unified communications as a service. But the area of growth for us is definitely Teams. And, during that pivot, our mission was and still is to be the best voice provider for Microsoft Teams. So I hope that's a good enough introduction.
Yes, it is. And it's actually something I wanted to bring up because I think there's something to be said about a SaaS provider, a technology provider that has a clear focus. And I actually counted the words in your mission statement, and there's just 12 of them. And we want to be the best Teams provider out there. And there's a lot of folks that are providing various different services, and maybe they just kind of caught wind of the trend and the fact that Teams is, the leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and they have this massive market. And of course, we had COVID with the UC boom, and everybody's working remotely, and there was a lot of people adopting it coming off of premise-based systems. But I want to lay a little bit of a foundation of just what UCaaS is and what Microsoft Teams is, and then how they work together. And feel free to elaborate on everything here before we go into some of the details, because there are some folks here that are watching, specifically more so in the SMB space that may not even be familiar with that. So you have unified communications, which does mean you have your phone system. That is your soft phone dialer that also integrates with the other modes of communication that you use both internally and externally, which would be your SMS, you have chat, you have video, you have file share, and you have integrations with other applications. And Teams, as it is coming free with the Microsoft 365 license, is traditionally a collaboration tool, which is more so just for the chat and the video and the having the rooms and the file share and all that. A lot of people don't know that Teams itself can be a phone system provider. And then there's the step further where there's other providers of voice networks that integrate with that, and they make the connection actually become the dial tone and the voice for Microsoft Teams, which has some additional benefits and advanced phone system capabilities that Teams itself does not have. Now, I want to hand it over to you. Fill in what I missed there and tell me where exactly UniVoiP fits within that area.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, early on, prior to making a pivot, it was very clear to me that when Microsoft entered unified communications as a service space, prior to that, Microsoft's telephony product, had gone through several different marketing changes, and, the name was, laying Skype for Business. But then in 2017, Microsoft started to offering phone system in Teams. Clear to me that they were going to be a leader in that space, because adding phone to Teams is just a smart way to bring calling into your flow of work. And if you're using Teams for messaging, collaboration, meetings, file share, yet you use a third-party phone system, you're leaving a lot of productivity benefits on the table. You bring it all together into your flow of work, and you will increase productivity without a doubt. So, when we made that pivot and we realized this was something that was about to happen, we stepped back and asked ourselves, how do we become successful in this space? The overwhelming answer at the time was, we have to be easy to do business with. We have to simplify the entire process, because if you remember, there was a lot of ambiguity in how do you actually connect the public switch telephone network to your Microsoft 365 tenant? There was the calling plans and then direct routing and so forth. And it wasn't, most IT professionals weren't really comfortable with making that leap, right? And so we decided that in order for us to be successful, we had to simplify the entire process. So we started to develop a management layer to simplify onboarding and number management for Microsoft Teams. And at the core, that's what we decided to do. But then you had to build the entire team of experts to deploy and support. And with our software talent we had on our staff, we done a pretty remarkable job in making that process easy with our management layer. So anyone can start to subscribe to us, even on our website. Within minutes, you can start a trial, procure some telephone numbers, assign them to your users, and you'd be able to make and receive calls directly within your team's environment, right? It's a native experience. You're not adding a third-party plugin or application in order to use telephony with Microsoft Teams. Our approach was, hey, all we're going to do is we're going to make it easy for IT admins to connect the public switch backbone to their Microsoft 365 tenant, our cloud voice backbone to their 365 tenant, and be able to reserve telephone numbers, add telephone numbers, assign them to users, and sync the users from their intra ID into this management layer to allow you to have the option of assigning numbers to users, any way you choose to. So, the success of the platform when we deployed finally in 2021 up until now has been remarkable. And I think we're catching, that the product lifecycle of Microsoft phone system, which I still believe is at the very early stages. We were maybe past the adoption phase, and it's not getting to a point where more and more organizations, companies are actively asking on how they could, use Microsoft as a phone system.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I want to touch back on a couple of things there and maybe elaborate a little bit on the benefit of having Teams native, a dialer in Teams. So what folks are looking at now, if they don't have voice enabled Teams, they have their toolbar on the left and there's no phone button, right? You can't click on that. There's no soft phone that comes up. And when you mean by native, it means that you can actually just dial from directly within the app. And what that does for the employee experience is that they don't have to switch between different applications. They can make their calls directly within everywhere they're doing everything else. So now you have one application to open and sign into in the day, not multiple. Now you have one license to manage rather than another phone system and then Teams. And then it comes down to the cost aspect, because sometimes there's disparity between the licensing models and not having the ability to account for maybe over licensing on phones or under licensing and vice versa. So what you've done is create an automated middle management layer that really speeds up and simplifies and makes easy the deployment of that, which can be complicated for folks that don't have that sort of technical background and don't understand what it means to tie in at the PSTN or have no idea what, ribbon and audio codes are, and they don't have those sort of capabilities. These are, everyday run-of-the-mill folks than maybe in these smaller businesses, but I don't want to discount this from and keep it just to the SMB space. I imagine that given the fact that you've built this automation layer, that your ideal customer profile is really anybody who's using Teams. So you can scale up to mid-market, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems to be that it would apply even to enterprise. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a management layer for Microsoft Teams phone system for any size business. You could have 5 users or 5,000 users. And the process is really the same, because you have a 365 tenant that needs to connect to our cloud voice backbone. And whether it's 5 or 5,000, the process is really the same. That's why we don't have minimums or maximums, right? We're just as The process is just as good if you've got 5 users or 5,000 users. In fact, the 5 users might be more problematic because they don't have, an IT person, right? They don't really get the concept of what is an auto attendant and a call queue,
Right.
right? So we actually spend the time to provide them that information and guide them through best practice. We'll set up user training, online user training. This is all included as part of our service. And we'll have working sessions with anyone that's interested to create auto attendants or call queues. And we also have a phone system management product where if somebody just wants to be completely hands off and say, look, I want you to manage Teams voice, build auto attendants, all of that. And we can do that as a solutions partner of Microsoft. We have the expertise to help you with anything to do with auto attendance call. We can build it for you by getting consent to access your Teams admin center, or we can just have working sessions, look over your shoulder and walk you through the process. Both options are available. Again, our job is to make it easy.
Yeah, I'm laughing and I'm smiling because I think some people who are watching this may not be aware of how complicated this conversation could be, but because you're making it so easy, it's almost just like, well, it's just done. We're not talking about all the other things and complications that can come into play, but I do want to highlight some of maybe the pitfalls that we are avoiding working with UniVoiP, right? So you're making it very easy. You have automation. And you mentioned one of them being you have user training. You have, I believe you're doing the porting as well. Porting is another big one that a lot of people don't get involved with, and you do that automated. Some other UC providers are charging for that, or they just leave it to the individuals to do that. And it's kind of like, well, where are you helping me out here? You just taking my money, or are you providing me a service? And it seems like you guys have really nailed that. I did see on the website you have a greater than 99% customer retention rate. So I think that speaks for itself. But what are some other perhaps pitfalls that individuals running these businesses or small IT teams, lean IT teams that they could run into if they weren't going through such an easy process?
Yeah, I think that first of all, let me just mention the fact that if an organization is using Microsoft Teams for internal, voice communications, just internally for messaging, collaboration, meeting, file sharing, there is no good reason to use a third-party phone system. Because using the Microsoft Teams phone system natively, you're going to enhance user experience. You're going to reduce IT overhead costs because the source of truth is intra-ID, and it's one application to manage. There are not multiple applications to manage. It's one thing. You're already doing it. Believe it or not, you're managing Teams. If you have a 365 tenant, you increase your security posture because you just have one authentication to Microsoft. There isn't another third party that you have to log into or store your information. It's all in your Teams environment. And we find that our customers will save anywhere from 10 to 15% on their monthly expenditures when they migrate away from a third-party phone system. It might be different for different scenarios, but that's what we see in general. So there's really no good reason for it. My advice to folks that are in that situation, they're using Teams already for messaging, collaboration, use it to call each other, right? You're probably using it to have a meeting, right? Start calling each other person to person, right? Peer to peer. Use it for screen sharing. If you're doing that, then you're ready to migrate, to add phone system to all of this. That's really, to me, is a litmus test for me to know whether you're ready or not. If you're using Teams already and you're finding that it's making you productive, there's no good reason to stop.
Because it's already adopted, right? Like one of the biggest problems with the new technology is getting your employees to adopt it, to use it, to get used to it. And what you're saying is you're already doing that. Why not just add another core and key functionality that is critical to your business through the same experience that you're already having?
Consistent user experience to your workflow, right? Whether you're sending a message and escalating into a voice call or calling one of your contacts externally on any device. I could be on my mobile device using Teams, or I could be using my desktop, or I can use a purpose-built phone, right, to do that. The experience is consistent, and it's not a forklift upgrade in that scenario. You're already using Teams. It's not like we're going to come in one night and rip out your existing infrastructure and then start to put a new system, over the weekend and do the
Right.
forklift up. It doesn't have to be this way. You're already using it. And in fact, we provide, a 30-day proof of concept trial that you can actually procure some telephone numbers and assign it to your IT team, perhaps start using it, set up an auto attendant call queue, use us to share best practice and building all of this. Get comfortable with it. And you can just add telephone numbers to users as you go. It doesn't have to all happen at the same time. So we provide an automated workflow for porting telephone numbers, and users will have access to be able to make outbound calls using a temporary number, and then at ports they get the new number assigned. So there so I'm going to age myself. Back in the day when we installed phone systems on-prem in my past life, in the early 90s, we installed phone systems and it was an ordeal. It took a lot because you had to replace an existing system. They couldn't coexist because of wiring issues. Here, you could be using your existing phone system and start to add the functionality to individual users at your own pace. Make sure you're comfortable. Yeah, just at your own pace and get people trained, build auto attendants, call queues, get all of that tested. And there doesn't have to be like a break. The only break point would be a port date. Like if you decide, okay, everything is good, we're going to port the numbers on such and such a date. And the way we do it, we make it very painless, uneventful. Everything is set up. Everyone's trained. They can make calls. And then 1 minute, 8 o'clock on a Friday morning, 1 minute, the calls are ringing on your old phone system. The next minute, they're coming in through Teams and no impact to the business. And so we make a point of making sure that whole transition is as smooth as it can be.
I don't think it could be I can't think of anything that would make it more smooth than it is. But you mentioned another thing there. I don't want to overlook the benefits of just talking about the differences between prem versus cloud, because there's still many businesses today that are still clinging and hanging on to their aging PBXs that are end of life, and they're trying to think about what it means to go to the cloud. And there are a lot of benefits. I mean, you have resiliency, you have the redundancy, you have multiple data centers, you're disaster proof in that sense, where it's not I worked for a business on the South Shore of Long Island. We were impacted by Hurricane Sandy. And they had phone systems on the floor level that were then a foot underwater. So that was no more. And then we had no phone system. We did not have a cloud phone system then. With a cloud-based phone system, you don't have that problem. As long as you have internet, you have power. And if you have the mobile app on your phone, even if you have cellular internet, then you can still make calls. So these are built-in benefits of just moving to the cloud. Then, of course, you don't have the large capital expenditure. You don't have those installations you were talking about. You don't have the wiring, the cabling. You don't have to worry about maintenance and update and patching. So there's inherent security benefits as well. So actually, I want to talk about two things here. So on the terms of the cost model, we know that cloud and going to Teams and go to UniVoiP is going to be more of an operational expense than a large capital expenditure. So I want to talk about how that pricing structure, not the actual pricing numbers, but how that's different, and specifically how that might be different than a Teams calling plan, because those are different options that you can go.
Yeah. So our approach to this is that, you still have to have the Microsoft phone system license. If you're not familiar with that, if you do not have or equivalent, anything lower than that, you're going to need a standard license, which gives you the phone system functionality. That generally retails at about $8. And you buy that through your existing sources that you buy any Microsoft license. And that's about $8, right? The calling plan is typically around $7. And that's what we offer it as. So, all in today, you're looking at about $15 for a full functional phone system with all the bells and whistles, everything included, including transcription of calls. And in fact, if you've got Copilot, not only does it transcribe it, it also gives you a summary of your conversation, which is really, really powerful. So you get that. And the street price on a UCaaS solution, maybe about 20. So there's definitely
or more for some of those capabilities that have, if you like you said, if you have Teams and you have Copilot and that's already situated for you, there are comparative, I'm not throwing out any suppliers' names or anything like that, but it's upwards of $25 or more for AI capabilities with another UCaaS provider.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And you bring up a really good point is, having one application that, manages your flow of work is really important because of what's coming in the future. Copilot, AI isn't really widely used today, right? But I suspect as people start to get exposed to it, they're going to wonder how they did without it, right? A Copilot is still, hasn't been widely adopted, but I think once it starts, wrapping up that adoption curve, there's going to be no competition in terms of, forget about cost. It's the productivity benefits, right? The fact that you can summarize a phone call, right? In fact, I'd much rather, if I'm speaking to someone, I'd much rather have a phone call because I can have it transcribed and summarized for me. And it can tell me the bullet item of topics that we talked about, action items, all of that in that call.
right.
I'd much rather have that delivered to me after I've had an hour conversation with someone, right?
It makes you more effective as I mean, it's incredibly useful for me personally. When I'm having a conversation, I like to be engaged. It's kind of like, being in college. Like if you're sitting there listening to like a lecture, you're engaged with something and you're looking down and typing, writing your notes down the whole time. How really engaged can you be in the conversation? It's like they call it an AI assistant, right? It's like having your own assistant there. So you can just pay attention and then you have the full scope of what's going on because you were intimately involved with what you were doing, which has essentially more impact per interaction. And then you can go back and you'll get the summary, like you said, broken down by section, by key takeaways, and all that stuff built into there. I don't even think it's a matter of like, we want more productivity. I think the adoption is going to happen because of the expectations that individuals have in their personal lives, with everything getting pushed into even their iPhones or their Androids. AI is going to be a part of their daily life. So why would they not expect or want or appreciate having that in their business life as well? It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to have more capabilities on an individual level than go to work and being like, I can't do what I do on my phone.
I mean, there are, according to published reports, there are about 20 million users globally that use Microsoft phone system today. I heard about 10 to 15% are using the Microsoft calling plan. The rest of them are using operators like us, right? But that number is, I think it's the tip of the iceberg. I think we're going to see more and more organizations just adopt the phone system because of the things that are coming, with including AI. All of the, everything you do is tied together, whether you have a phone call or a document or an email. These three things could provide you with additional information that, in the past was lost. The connection between them was lost, or you
Yeah.
just have it, right? I was looking for some statistics, and I, using Copilot, which connects to my, my OneDrive work files, right? I asked the statistics question and it came right up and it said, according to Dean Manzoori, in this document, it's this. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is something I had figured out and wrote a little document, 4 years ago, and I didn't know it existed,
Yeah, it's it's otherworldly. It's what used to be sci-fi is very, I'm not going to say slowly, it's very quickly evolving, and I am both excited and scared. And to be honest with you, I think everybody is. But in terms of what you'll see from a business aspect, it's going to be all real benefit to the employees. And I think it's an important note to make that even if you're not blown away by the ability to have transcriptions or some of the other AI capabilities that we have today, it's going to be rapidly accelerating and rapidly advancing. And you don't want to be in the position where the next huge capability comes out that like completely changes the game. And then you're like, oh, well, now I want to make the switch. You want to position yourself to be riding the wave, not getting hit with the wave. So that's what I would say is my call to action to, start taking action now and make that leap. But I also wanted to touch on another thing you mentioned there, which was the fact that you are an operator versus Teams calling plans. And I don't want individuals to make the mistake of confusing that those are the same things, because a Teams calling plan has limitations both in the way it's structured for what it provides. Last I checked, and this is a couple of years ago when I was selling Teams, it was more so like it was a minutes plan. And then there's also the functionality where I think at the time it had lacked advanced features or even ancillary features like eFax and call recording and stuff like that. So can you talk about the way the licensing works for you guys and other services that come along with?
Yeah, so our product is called Cloud Voice for Microsoft Teams, and it essentially provides, connectivity to the public switch telephone network. We provide telephone number, we register emergency address, we register CNAM, and we have different variations. You can have, a all-inclusive package, inbound, outbound, domestic calling included, or you can pay as you go. We have all of that as part of our service offering. But in terms of the differentiation, to your point, of being that automation layer, that management layer, we close the gap for anything that might be missing with the Microsoft offering. First of all, got 24/7 live support, US-based support. So if you have any questions whatsoever with Microsoft Teams, if you're a customer of ours, we instruct you to call us first. We'll resolve the issue. If it is a Microsoft thing, then we'll raise a ticket on your behalf directly with Microsoft. So there's no finger pointing. If you have an issue, let us know, because more than likely we know what's going on and we can help you with it. So we close that support gap. You don't have to worry about, how do I get support? We've been doing it for years. Supporting voice is a little different than supporting data, right? Data can wait maybe a day, but voice is like, I can't call, it's now. So we cover that. But we also provide, we have multiple platforms. We do have, a virtual fax platform. So if you need to have faxing, we provide that. You do email to fax to email, that. Or if you have a fax machine, we can give you a fax adapter that you plug into your fax machine. Same thing, right? We do offer SMS for person-to-person scenarios that mimics what you normally would do on your native SMS app on your mobile device. We also can provide what's called compliance call recording, because Microsoft does have recording out of the box. It's more of a productivity thing where you can turn it on or off when you want. Of course, you can just turn on transcription or get benefits from, Copilot. But we provide, client recording. And also we can overlay a native Teams call center. Microsoft does have call queue, and it's actually gotten a lot better with the new release of the Queues app, which requires a Teams premium license. That gives you a lot more information about queues and auto attendance that was missing, I think, in the past. And so that's been released, and it's getting better by the day. But if somebody has this very complex contact center of 50 agents, right? That's a little bit of a different tool, right? My litmus test is that, do you have a call center manager? If you have a call center manager, then you need this overlay. The Microsoft queuing is probably not for you. So yeah, we do layer all of these things. And we also provide analog devices for paging interfaces using our SIP feature server, or using a SIP gateway on your Microsoft Teams tenant. So both options we support. It really depends on what the customer prefers in terms of cost and service. So yeah, we eFax, compliance recording, call center, paging systems, door entry systems, analog devices. We fill the gap of anything that might be missing with the Teams phone.
Yeah, that's really important. That was something that I had run into numerous times. And again, this is more a couple of years ago. As you mentioned, Teams itself has made some advancements in their advanced call routing and things like that to really kind of pick up the slack on some of the feature sets that weren't quite there in the past. But the fact that you're able to cover all the bases on the other VoIP connected, well, not say VoIP, but the other SIP connected devices, it means a lot, because if you just go Teams, you're not going to have that. And there's a lot of phone systems today with premise-based systems that are configured that way, where they have other internet connected things like paging and stuff like that, that does need to also be migrated over in other services. Otherwise, you need to figure out a different way of doing it, right?
Yeah, and the key to all of this is the fact that all of this is managed through this management layer called service control. Service control is, all your interactions has a self-care module where you can look at your tickets and open a ticket. You could update tickets, see your history. You can look at your invoices. You can look at your subscriptions, and you have access to a number management module where you can add or remove telephone numbers. You could procure a number, initiate a port request. If you're not using them in an active mode where you're actually using it to assign to some service, you could park them. You could reserve them for pennies and on real time be able to activate those numbers when you need them, right? And all the other, the eFax, our SIP feature server, all of that is managed through this single pane of glass to have complete control and visibility to your service in one place, especially when we're talking about telephone numbers. What if you have a telephone number that is pointed to Teams and for some reason you want to change that into an eFax? Well, you can go in there and unassign the number from a user and move it from one platform to the next, move it to fax and make your assignment there. So it allows you to see all your telephone numbers and move them across different services.
Yeah, it's something that one would expect to have, but you'd be shocked to find out it's not always the case. And even DIDs, even the numbers you mentioned, on pennies, I've seen out there quotes that had, a pack of 10 DIDs for like $25, $30. And I'm like, you're charging $3 for a number that's not in use when we know that these are not that expensive. And I think it's just great you guys are doing it the way that you're doing it. And the management layer is probably the core of the value that you guys are offering, but also the support is a big deal. And then the network, because while no one really loves to call into Microsoft support, their network is also something that their phone system network has gotten better, but I think it's probably not as great as what yours is going to be in terms of reliability. So it's like when Microsoft goes down, you still have their cloud goes down for maybe their collaboration services, while the video may not work. You still have the ability to make calling, and that's a big difference.
Yeah. We in order to do all of this management layer during the pivot, we actually had to redeploy our infrastructure. So we built a network from the ground up, a programmable network that supports cloud native applications, right? Oftentimes, maybe 10 years ago, and even today, some are like that. You're getting an application that isn't really cloud native, and you're trying to shoehorn that into a cloud native service, and there's always challenges with that. So when we did, when we deployed the service, we made sure that our applications are cloud native, and therefore, if you're making a change at the application layer, we don't have to worry about what's happening on the network layer, because these things are connected to each other with APIs. So if I make a change to the network layer, that's not going to impact my application, right? That's an important distinction to make when you're looking at a provider is how robust is that infrastructure? So the network is programmable. At a push of a button, we take a layer 2 switch out of service gracefully without dropping a packet. It's self-healing. It reroutes things. We talking about artificial intelligence. Well, the first application of AI was years ago, when we deployed our network, because it learns. It was called machine learning.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who are confused and that they think AI was something that was just invented, but it was really just commoditized, and they've now turned us into the data set and the product. But these things have been behind the scenes, not in the generative sense, but in the machine learning sense for quite some time.
And so our network is based on that self-healing concept, programmable and independent of, how the applications are running on it. That gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of how do we apply updates. There is no forklift upgrades once or twice a year. Improvements and enhancements happen, in real time. Dev stage production, things are just happening all the time. There is no, we're going to be doing a system upgrade, once a year or once every 2 years, in most cases, right? This is all continuous.
Yeah. It's almost who it's almost such a simple conversation to have with someone that it feels like there's something missing, but it isn't. And it's here's the statement. It's if you're using Microsoft Teams today, but you're using a different phone system and they're not in the same application, then you're paying $25 per license on that. Yet you have Microsoft Teams, you could be spending, relatively speaking, perhaps close to half of that and getting it all into one application. And you can do it with UniVoiP for the easiest experience possible because you have this middle management layer and you have US-based support and you're purpose built for it.
Yeah, we guarantee an outcome, right? There some IT professionals I've heard aren't really making that move because of uncertainty, right? We remove all uncertainty. We've done it enough to know all the pitfalls and best practice tasks that must be done beforehand, and we'll guarantee a successful outcome. And it's not a forklift upgrade. It's more of an evolution, a migration over to the Teams phone system.
Well, guarantees are important. I'm thinking back to, I don't know if you know the movie Tommy Boy, and he put the guarantee on the box. That's how you get people to buy in. And based off the fact that you have greater than 99% customer retention satisfaction is, it's an easy backup to your claim.
And we have a POC, no obligations, 30-day trial. You can actually go to our website, and because of our automation, we are able to offer this without any interactions. Some providers will ask you to just fill out this form and we'll contact you when you're trying to start a trial. With us, you can literally start the trial, and within 15 minutes, you can be making and receiving calls. The prerequisite is, Microsoft 365 tenant with the phone standard license or the E5 license. By the way, there are, from what I understand, reports there are about somewhere around 80 million users that have an E5 license, which means they have the phone standard license, yet they don't have a calling plan.
Right.
They're not using the phone system that they're paying for. In your scenario that you just mentioned, you're reducing your cost by half. You're reducing your cost by 75%, right?
Yeah. And you're getting more out of what you already have. And you said 80 million users with E5 licenses and 20 million Teams users today, which means there's a 60 million seat.
It's actually 100 million that have E5, 20 million are using. So it's 80
so
million
it's 80 gap.
Potential.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So there's some people out there that really need to take a look at their licensing. And that's a great point. It's a great point because, walking into a client, folks like myself can simply ask them, what's your licensing? What are you using for your Office suite? Are you using Gmail? Are you using Microsoft? You're using Microsoft. So, all right, well, what's the licensing that you have on that? They're like, well, we have, E5s and some E3s mixed in. And I'm like, well, what phone system are you using? And they're like, we have X and X so-and-so. Like, how much are you paying for that? Are you getting everything you want out of it? Oh, we're paying $25. And that's the conversation flow, right? That's the easy way to put it in terms for them. And I think that solves a business problem of cost being wasted and then the unification of applications and not having the toggle tax, higher employee productivity, higher employee satisfaction, higher employee retention.
Yeah, I think that the higher productivity is what it's really hard to communicate that to somebody who's in the market for a phone system, right? But our experience has been once they start using it, it'll be very hard for them to go back to a phone system because, the questions you get from some companies that are considering this move, they'll ask things in relation to their existing phone system. Like, does it do this and that, or does it have this feature? So the question that I always ask is, what are you trying to accomplish? Let's not talk about, simultaneous ring, because in Microsoft, it's called attendant routing. So if you're looking for simultaneous ring, you're not going to find it, but it does have that feature. Let me assure you, right? Or things like extension dialing comes up a lot. And to me, is like extension dialing was something that you had to have and you had a phone system because it was relegated to just having this footprint with a dial pad. And you couldn't type anybody's names, right? You actually had, what did you do? You had this Excel spreadsheet printed out with everybody's name and extension. So you look up the name and dial the extension, right? So now with Teams, you just go to your teams the way you chat. You just enter their name, you can look at your chats, you can escalate to a phone call, just click the call and it calls them. So extension was just something that everybody got used to, right? Because it didn't have the full functionality of what Teams does.
Yeah.
The other way of some will say, well, what about from the outside? When they call in, they know my extension, they can dial it. I'm like, can they speak? Can they just,
Yeah.
how about we ask them, please say the name of the person you wish to reach?
Right.
And they say the name, you find all the matches, they verify, and it transfers the call. There is no need for an extension. I remember in the old days when we built auto attendants, we used to always say, press 1 for a directory. You press 1, and then it'll say, please enter the first few letters of the person's first name or last name.
Yes.
Try to do,
You would be shocked. I spent the first couple of years of my career as an SDR making 200 cold calls a day, and so many, if not, I would say honestly, it's got to be at least 50% at that time of the people I was calling, and these are large organizations that I was calling into, still had that set up where you type in the 3 letters, and I'm like, and this is why I was calling them, which was funny, so it's like, it's really shocking to see. And I think there's a lot of people out there also that aren't aware that IVR, which is what you're talking about, the interactive voice response, to be able to speak someone's name to get to them, is a feature that is available to them at the organization size that they are. They're like, oh, well, I'm just calling Citibank, so I figured that's something they have, but I don't have that, and it's not for us, but it's available today, and it should be something everyone has by this point for sure.
Yeah, it's included in all of this, right? It's, and so extension dialing, sure, you can try to implement it in your teams, but why, right? Let's focus on what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to communicate internally. Well, you can do that by just typing their name. And externally, you can do that by just saying their name, right?
Right.
So it shifts the focus from something that was a necessity, to something that, look, you don't really have to do it. Henry Ford, I think it was, that said once that if I asked my customers, when he was building a car, what they wanted, they would say, we want faster horses, right? Or they would say, we want horses that, we want cars that can eat hay, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a great line. I've not heard that one before. Well, I think we have covered a lot. I did want to also touch on one thing before we start to wrap it up, because I think we actually went over on time a little bit here. So sorry about that. I know it took us a little bit of technical difficulties getting in today, but that's neither here nor there. To the folks that are of that mindset that still are on that extension dialing page, we'll call it, and they haven't turned the page yet, I'm assuming those are the same people who are going to want to cling to physical handsets. So I just, does UniVoiP support physical handsets? Yeah. Is just throwing it out there, right? So it's an important note to make, because not everybody will want to be comfortable using a soft phone, although that's the direction it's going to go. But there's some people who just feel more comfortable with a handset and pressing a BLF and holding the line and transferring it.
You can do all of that. What we find in our customer base, thousands of users, by and large, most people use the client on their desktop, on their mobile device.
Yeah.
I have a phone because that's my job. I have to have, but it's a paperweight. I don't use it because I'm more productive using the client with a speaker or a headset. I don't like wearing headsets, so I got a speaker. But I have a phone, right? It's just a different device sitting there. I don't use it. I'm gonna approximately 95% or more of our customers, our users, are not using a phone. They're using the client. But there are some that use it, and we have no problem with that. In fact, we sell or rent them as well.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Dean, thank you so much for coming on. I think we covered the vast majority of it. I got some really nice, colorful insights and landed on that one quote about how we have cars eating hay. So I can't wait to write my article on this conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we jump off?
No, thank you for having me today, and it was a pleasure speaking with you. This was fun.
Awesome. Thanks again, Dean.
All right, thank you.